How are you guys all doing? It was so fun to connect with you yesterday, and welcome to our second day of class. Today we're going to talk about managing our emotions, um, and I'm just wondering like how the work we did yesterday felt for you. Like, we can talk at the end of class, but I'm hoping that maybe you got some relief from the anxiety and this all the stuff that we've been feeling, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Um, we're going to talk about how to manage our own emotional states and also how to handle other people. I'm going to give you some really solid practical things about how you can show up for other people. But in order to show up for other people, we have to be fully managing our own emotional states. And as empaths and sensitive people, we have lots of emotion. So empaths are very emotional people in general. So I want to tell you, it's highly normal for empaths to be really emotional. That's our natural state. In fact, it's part of our superpower. And it's the reason why we make good healers, why we have very high natural emotional intelligence, and we need that for all that we're doing. And here's a few things that are normal for sensitive empaths and healers just to know, okay? Most of us have a really wide emotional range. So if you think about emotions as colors, like crayons, there are some people that get like the 5 coloring box with 5 crayons on it. And there's some people that get the 10 color box. And we have like those giant 64 color emotion, like the one with the sharpener in the middle that you like to have so much when you were a kid. That's a 64 colors. And that is normal. So we should and want to be able to have the ability to feel the entire range of those emotions. That we have like the emotional range of an opera singer, a lot of us. That means, and the good thing about that is that we can totally relate to everyone else's feelings, which is the good thing and the bad thing about what we're feeling right now. But on the good side of this, it means we love to talk about and process our emotions. It means we relate to everything around us through our feelings. So you can say, like, when you're talking about things or writing about things, you can think, some people say, well, I really think that, I really see that, I really feel that, and it's whatever you write there is often a sign of the way that you process. And a lot of times as emotional people, we write, I really feel what I really feel is, so think about that. And we have a very rich emotional life. So we experience the richness of life through our emotions. And the other thing that's super cool about this is that our soul guidance comes through our feelings, which is why we're a lot more intuitive than less feeling or less emotional people. So I want you to just kind of take a moment and really honor your emotional self. So like pat yourself on the shoulder, give your heart a little hug. I love you. Like take a moment to honor your emotions, because many of us judge and hate that. I just turned my mic up. Can you hear me Can you hear me better? Is that better, Renee? Okay, yeah, I just turned it up. Thank you for saying something. So a lot of times we have a huge judgment about that aspect of ourselves. We're really judgy about it and reject that side of us. And we do that, I think, because we have a lot of unprocessed feelings. So unprocessed feelings are when we have an emotion and we don't know how to process that, we stick it in our body. Unprocessed emotions live in our organ and muscle tissue. And we also can have a lot of unprocessed trauma, and unprocessed trauma lives in our nervous system tissue. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And the other thing about trauma is when we're an empath or we're highly sensitive emotionally, we get traumatized more deeply and easier than other people, because we feel it more. So let's say you have an empath and a non-empath siblings, right? And they can have the same experience inside the same family dynamics, but because the empath has that spongy energy field, we're going to talk more about that tomorrow, and this highly emotional and sensitive nature, the empath sibling will feel what's going on in the family dynamic like an 8 or 9 out of 10, or where a non-empath sibling will feel it like a 2. So let's say your parent comes home and yells at you, daddy comes home and yells at you, and the empath child will be like, daddy was so mad. It really went in. I really felt it because it penetrated my energy field, and I felt like the mad was turned up on the volume to a 10. And the non-empath sibling goes, yeah, he was sort of mad, whatever. Like that. It's like that. So that can really leave us in a bind, especially as children, and it's something that we need to work through and learn to accept. But the bottom line of that is we can take in a lot more trauma or experience a lot more trauma. And we can feel the energy of something that happened as if it really happened to us. So if you are in an environment where there's like a lot of negative energy, like a lot of like underground energy, or things that are present energetically more than they're present physically, we will feel as if it really happened. So here's a kind of a creepy example, but I couldn't think of a better one. I wanted to really show you this though. And I was just talking to one of my clients who had this experience where she grew up in a family where their uncle moved into the house, and the uncle was sort of had this like creepy, lechy, molester kind of energy. And as a little girl, she felt that she would feel his energy as if it was really happening to, even though he never touched her. She had to process that trauma as though it happened. So I just want you to take that in. And it did hit her nervous system the same way as if it happened. Now, if it had actually happened, it would have been a harder trauma for her. But I want you to really like think about that for a minute, okay? Because it means that we have to deal with a whole set of energetic experiences, felt experiences, intuitive experiences, and we need to process them in a different way than other people do. Okay, so we can end up sort of hyper identifying with our feelings too, and this is part of like the bummer side of being an empath. When we hyper identify with our feelings, we feel like we are our feelings. I am my feeling, like it's all of who I am. And when really our feelings are a slice of the pie, so you have a body, but you're more than a body. You have a mind, you're more than your mind. You have feelings, you're more than your feelings. You have, and who you are, the fullness of who you are there is really your consciousness or your full self. But a lot of us really get stuck feeling like, no, I am my feelings. So that leads us to is feeling really, really overwhelmed a lot emotionally. Okay, that can happen. And so we get flooded. We're going to talk about flooding in a minute. When we can't manage our own feelings, and then we get flooded with other people's feelings, we have a big, swampy emotional mess. Okay, so all of that is part of the reason why it's so incredibly important to understand and manage our feeling stuff, because since it is our superpower, we need to live in the light side of it, and we need to heal these places where we've been really wounded or unskilled. Since nobody's been ever taught how to handle their emotions, hardly anyone learns that skill. And I think it's a skill we all need to learn. We should be teaching it in kindergarten. We should be learning it like so much earlier than now. But here we go. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit too about the definition of empath. And I know some of you will know this, but I'm going to talk about, so we're just all on the same page here. So there are really three kinds of empaths. And first of all, an empath, just to define that, what I call an empath is sort of like a different subset of person, a different subset of humanity. They're a type of person. And what they do is that we feel or experience other people's feelings and experiences in our own self. This is different from being sympathetic. Sympathetic is like, oh, it looks like that person is sad and I feel bad for them. An empath feels that person's feelings as if it's our feelings. So you get next to someone and you're like, I don't know why I'm so sad all of a sudden, And it's really important to recognize that about yourself, because until you understand that you're experiencing other people's stuff as if it's your stuff, you really can walk around and think that you're all kinds of crazy. And yet the way that we process that makes us the perfect skill set for people who want to do healing work, or whose soul is calling them to do healing work. So here's kind of a breakdown of the 3 ways that we can experience empathy. The first is physical empathy, and that means when we put our hands on people, we feel in their bodies, we feel in our body what they're feeling in their body. And I love to work hands-on with people, so when I work with people in my office, except for now, I'm doing energy work on them so I can feel what's going on. And my hands are very sensitive to feeling energy. So I feel a lot with my hands. That's another part of physical empathy. And I can also feel, so you may ask yourself, like, you know, when you are feeling a sudden pain that comes out of nowhere, is it my feeling or is it somebody else's? This is an important question that we need to ask ourselves as sensitives. Then we have emotional empathy. And that's when we experience other people's feelings as if it's our own feeling. And you will, so the way that I first figured this out about myself was way back when I was in college, before this was a word, before this was a concept or a thing or anything. Like, there was no one talking about it back then. And I went to a party. It was like Friday night. I think I was like 18 or 19. It was a house party. And I was feeling great. College party, yay. And I walk in and I sit down next to this guy, because this is what an empath does, who was having a really bad day. He was like crying into his beer. And he just had this whole like sad story. I don't even remember what it was, but he was super depressed. And I don't know, like after like 5 minutes or 10 minutes of talking to him, all of a sudden I felt this wave of sadness, despair, pain, physical pain wash over me. And I was like, oh my God, I gotta go home. Like, I don't know what happened to me. Like, I feel awful. And I had to get up. I left the party. And just as chance would have it, or my guides, whoever, I turned around and I looked through the window and I could still see him on the couch. And I was far enough away from him that I actually felt fine again. And in that moment, I understood, I had the penny dropped and I got it, that what I had been experiencing when I was sitting next to him wasn't me. It was him. And the light bulb went off and I didn't even know what to say, because the word empath wasn't a thing then. Okay. Then another one that you can have that's a little more rare, but quite interesting, and maybe some of you have it, is kind of the telepathic version of this, which is when you can tell what other people are thinking. So some empaths experience the ability to catch other people's thoughts. And this tends to be in empaths who are also clairaudient, by the way. So if you have the psychic gift of hearing your guides and you're an empath, you may have that telepathic. And it's kind of trippy to tell what people think about you. And this was a really hard one when we were kids and teenagers and really like, you know, super vulnerable to what other people thought about us. So that's a tricky one if you have it, but it's sort of rare. So when and you can see how when these things combine together, they create the perfect skill set for a healer. So we put our hands on people and we are able, or even proximity, or even if you don't put your hands on people, we're going to be able to experience what a person can't share with us. So especially if you're working with children, animals, elderly people, nonverbal people, or even in my practice where I work with, you know, regularly abled people, I often work with people who are in kind of a emotional turmoil, and they're not really able to articulate what they're feeling or describe it. But it doesn't matter, because I know. It's like the perfect built-in MRI X-ray machines for people who are meant to do healing work. So congratulations. And we need to really learn how to manage it, because when we don't, we get into this really difficult place called empathic overload. And if we go back to the idea that we are a big psychic, that we're a big sponge, and that our energy field has a spongy layer to the outside, empathic overload is what happens when the sponge is full. And for me, it happens about 20 minutes into Walmart, the shopping mall, movie theater, airplanes, which are one of my least favorite things. Any of those things where there's a lot of people, we can really get sunk by this empathic overload. And what it feels like is tired to the point of exhaustion, fatigue, extreme fatigue, unfocused thinking, brain fog, anxiety, crankiness, irritability, and a general sense of being overwhelmed. And maybe like when you, after you go shopping, you have to come home and take a nap, and you just feel really wrung out. Or if you have empathic children, you may notice that they're like trashed when they come home from school, that kind of thing. So to avoid this crash, you can now, because you know now how to do it, you're going to do your grounding. If you have to go into a big box store, a place like Walmart or some BJ's or something like that, Costco, I think those places are very hard on sensitives. So you want to do your grounding meditation before you go in and bubble up. And then when you get out and you come back into your car, you're going to squeeze the sponge and release everything you picked up and bubble up again, right? So that's the basic thing. And I bring it up now because I feel like we are in a massive empathic overload state. So some of the connection to the hive mind that we talked about yesterday creates this chronic empathic overload for me. So I'm constantly feeling it, like I'll work on it and I feel better. I get out in the sun or I go for a walk, I do my meditation, and time ticks by. And it, you know, I think this is why, part of the reason why it's the 3 o'clock thing or the 4 o'clock thing that a lot of people were experiencing when we talked about it yesterday. When we hit that level, our sponge is full and we're in empathic overload, and that's what that is. Here's a little bit of a myth and misconception about empaths, by the way. So we all understand that we pick up other people's feelings, which we do. But when we have good management of our own emotional skills, we can get to the point where we don't get fully knocked off our center by other people's emotions. So when our own emotional system is clear and we fully processed our own emotions and we're doing our regular emotional work, we lose that thing that happens where we get fully knocked off center. So when you have a big emotion that you can't deal with inside of yourself, that's when somebody else has that emotion, it really knocks you over. You freak out when somebody else is feeling it. And there will be something in your emotional toolkit, or in your emotional, well, there'll be one crayon in that 64 box of crayons that you don't process very well because your family didn't process it. And this really depends on the rules of your family. So some families have rules or ways of being where you could never feel angry. So when somebody around you feels anger, it fries your circuits. It like knocks you out. Maybe you're from that family that only feels anger, and that there's only one crayon and it's anger, and every emotion gets pushed through that one, right? Other people have sadness as their thing, right? So if the sad family, you know, or if you were never allowed to feel it. So whatever emotions you have that you push into the shadow, and we're going to talk about the shadow in class 4, when somebody else comes with that feeling, that's where you get it. That's where it knocks you over. So the point is, if you're, and it could be fear, anxiety, grief, sadness, it's usually one of those. And look at your family of origin and you'll be able to tell what it is. But the point is, if you're emotionally healthy, you're not going to get super triggered by other people. It's those people who are feeling that one or two feelings you don't let yourself feel that ring your bell really hard, where you can't process it and it knocks you over. So I want you to consider that, and as you go forward and as you really learn how to process your emotions, that will change, and you'll be able to get to a place where you can really show up for anyone's feelings. Deep grief, you got it. Deep anger and rage, you can stay present. Deep fear or anxiety, you don't have to check out. It doesn't knock you out of your body because you're able to process that inside yourself. It's good to have faith that can happen. So three things that really happening right now. It's always bad difficult, challenging for empaths to deal with these 3 emotional issues, and it's really ramped up huge right now. And this is anxiety, depression, and addictions. They're sort of the trifecta problems, that emotional problems that empaths deal with, sensitive people, healers, and people in general, but it's particularly for sensitives that I'm talking about. And I want to kind of go through these one at a time here and really help you understand how to support yourself if you're having those things right now, okay? So I want to start with just asking you to consider the difference between fear and anxiety. Fear is a natural physiological response to actual danger. And we're all feeling a lot of fear right now because there's actual physical danger. There's this virus that kills people. And when we're faced with danger, our autonomic nervous system kicks into drive, and our adrenal glands fire adrenaline and cortisol into our bloodstreams, and that stimulates the fight, flight, or freeze response that hopefully saves your life. So let's say, for example, you're walking in the woods and a bear jumps out at you, and your autonomic nervous system kicks in before you can think and squeezes your adrenal glands, and you fight, flight. Well, hopefully you don't fight the bear. Maybe you run up a tree or you do the bunny freeze, and the bear walks away and you live another day. So fear saved your life. That's what it's supposed to do. Anxiety is when we have the fear response to something that's not actually threatening us in this moment. So that's either the thought of a past, so it's the past or the haunted past, or the future idea of that danger. So 2 weeks later, you're walking down the same path and you get to the same spot, and you have the fear response because you think you remember you remembered that the bear jumped out, and you think maybe a bear will jump out again. So you remember the past, and what if it happens now? And your body has the same fear response, but it's just really responding to your thoughts. That's what anxiety is, okay? Anxiety is also made worse by unprocessed trauma. So if you have a lot of unprocessed trauma in your life, it's really turns up the volume on anxiety. So bad things happened in the past, and now we're afraid bad things are going to happen again. That kind of anxiety expresses itself as hypervigilance, which is the feeling of always waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's very uncomfortable if you have that. And we're going to talk in a bit about how we process trauma. Do you need to do that? Now, empaths often have a low-level background anxiety, kind of, it's called freeform anxiety, and it's due, I think, this is my theory, to the porous nature of the energy field. So if you're kind of a sponge out in the world, we might feel more anxious because we're just more vulnerable. We're more open. We have kind of a raw feeling about that. And it's like you could leave your house and go to the market, and you're not sure what's going to happen to you as an empath. So it's normal. Now we're really ramped up into actual fear because something could happen to us. But empaths often have that low-level background anxiety. And if you have it, it's called freeform anxiety. Then grounding and basic energy management will really, really help you, as long as the mindfulness that we talked about yesterday. But mindfulness is that technique that teaches us to stay in the present moment. In this moment, I'm perfectly safe. And that kind of freeform anxiety is a habit, that where you're always in the what if. And with mindfulness training, we break the habit and we change the habit actually to stay in the present moment, where we can actually deal with what's going on right now. So mindfulness is the best relief for freeform anxiety that I know of. And I can tell you this with absolute certainty because I cured myself, basically, or worked my way out of a panic level disorder, anxiety disorder that I had, caused by postpartum depression. So postpartum depression gets worse after each of your kids. And I had mild with my first and second child, but with my third child, it was really pretty bad. And I had panic attacks that were so bad that it was like ditch your shopping cart in the middle of the supermarket level panic attacks. And I didn't want to take medication because I had a baby and I was nursing the baby, and I felt like the medications were going to cross through the milk, and I didn't want to do that. So I worked with a therapist who specializes in mindfulness techniques for anxiety, and I've learned, I have to say, I worked very hard during that period, and I just don't feel anxiety very much anymore, thank God, because it's really a terrible feeling. And one of the things that I learned, so here's the technique for you, that really worked for me was something that called facts versus feelings. And I literally carried around a little notebook with me during that phase of my life where I would start feeling the anxiety rise, and I would write on one side what the facts were. So the facts are, there's a virus. It's pretty bad right now. Some people are dying. It's this percentage of people, but I'm wearing gloves and I've got a mask on. Those are the facts. And then on the other page, you write the feelings, and your feelings will be like, blah, 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 right? And what that does is it begins to make a distinction between facts and feelings. We need to deal with both. So we need to handle our feelings in a loving, compassionate way. We need to caretake our feelings, honor our feelings. We don't want to push them away because they just go into the shadow and create problems. We want to actually helpfully, kindly manage our feelings. And then once we've done that, we can look back in the facts category, because the facts look different when they don't have feelings. The facts are they are what they are. And when we're not triggered emotionally, we usually are pretty skilled at dealing with facts. Become like problems that need a solution. And those solutions are, we can do them. We can wear gloves, we can wear a mask, we can wash our hands, we can wipe down our groceries, whatever we can do. We can find solutions to the problems if we're not like supercharged and overwhelmed with our emotional stuff. So if you have panic attacks, or if you feel like your anxiety is ramped really hard right now, try the facts versus feelings exercise and see if that works for you. Okay, so there's also something called trigger-based anxiety. And this is usually due to trauma. So when we have trauma that hasn't been properly healed yet, we'll often have anxiety attacks that are when we get like triggered. So it can be anything from the way the light looks in your room, or music that you hear, or somebody's presence, something happens that triggers you. And this is kind of PTSD, by the way. So if you know you have that, what you want to do, and if you do, I'm sorry, so very many of us do, you want to work at unpacking your trauma. And it usually takes like a multi-modality approach to unpack trauma, especially if it's severe. So the more severe it is and the more early it happened in your childhood, the more difficult it is to work through. Counseling with somebody who's really good at trauma-based counseling is super great. So there's all kinds of things like EFT and EMDR and all kinds of trauma-based therapeutic techniques that are very important to do. I think at some point we also need to work our trauma through the body. So unprocessed trauma stays in the nervous system and the fascial tissue. Our fascial tissue is like a connective tissue that covers our muscles and organs. It's very connected to the nervous system. And those two work together to hold traumatic experiences locked in our nervous system. So at some point, we need to release that through the body. There are a couple of things that I really recommend. Cranial sacral therapy is very effective at this, which is impossible to get now. So, when the world goes back to normal, get some cranial sacral. And that's also, sometimes you can get insurance to cover it. If you get somebody who's physical therapists are often cross-trained in cranial, and then you can get your insurance to cover it. Myofascial release is another fantastic modality for clearing trauma. And so is something called somatic experiencing, which used to be called the Feldenkrais method. And it's really a somatic way. So somatic means in the body, of letting go of trauma. And if you have that, I really, really seriously urge you to, when the time is right for you, work through some of that stuff. The last kind of anxiety that we deal with is social anxiety. Many sensitives and empaths have this. I think we have it more now than ever because we're super freaked out around being around people. I could feel it when I went into the supermarket the other day on Saturday, and I don't normally have social anxiety, but I think everyone had it, where this whole social distancing, which I wish they would call physical distancing, is scary. It's like scary. You're looking at somebody and you're like, did that person kill me? Like that with their virus that they don't know they have. So it's rather normal, even in regular times, for sensitives to have this, especially sensitives that are introverted. So many empaths are introverted, not all. There are some empaths that aren't. But if you are, you're going to be just generally happier working with people or dealing with people on a one-to-one basis. And that's fine. I don't think that's really considered social anxiety. It isn't in my book because I think it's quite normal. And it's okay. It's okay to prefer one-on-one. It's okay if you're an empath to prefer animals or small children or elderly people than a big crowded party. But if you have severe social anxiety, this needs to get worked on, and there are really some wonderful counseling methods for that. There is CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, that's quite beneficial for that, or ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and they're quite also, I think, especially if you're really having a hard time functioning, it's totally fine to be on medication for anxiety and depression. Medication has a place, and it's like a tool that we can use in our toolbook, that we don't need to be judgy on ourselves about having to use that. So if you feel like it helps you, rock on. There's a lot of studies that prove now that when we're children and we experience trauma, that it breaks our brain chemistry in a particular way, that a lot of times these psychiatric medications fix or heal. So it can be challenging to take medication because we have to be willing to experiment. It takes a long time to load them up into our system, and then we have to feel whether they work. So it can be a bit painful and difficult to find the right one. But if you do find the right one, it can have a pretty profound impact on your functionality. So don't think that you can't use that. Don't feel bad if you need it. Some people need it forever. Some people need it and get off of it. Thank God we have it. That's what I think. All right, so let's talk a little bit about depression. It's a huge topic, and we could do an entire class on depression, or any of these topics, by the way, but I'm just trying to headline it for you right now. And depression has so many roots to it. And in a way, when we're dealing with depression, we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. What is the cause for it, and what is the treatment for it? And I do think it's incredibly important to take it seriously. And as a sign that something needs to be done, do not brush it off if you have depression in yourself, and do not brush it off if other people have depression either. It's a very powerful message that something is wrong and needs healing. Just like if you have physical pain, hopefully you don't ignore that. Hopefully you know when we feel physical pain, we see that as a sign that we need healing, and we go get that healing. And depression is like the sort of, spiritual, emotional, psychic version of that. And we really, really need to honor that. So don't ignore it. Do something about it, okay? There are three sort of kinds or flavors of depression. There's angry depression, sad depression, and numb depression. Some people have all three, right? So you can think, if you feel like you suffer from depression, or somebody that does, you can ask yourself, is it more angry? Is it more sad? Is it more numb? Or do you have them all mixed together? Depression can be mild, moderate, and severe. We know that. Or chronic, right? So it can be intermittent, chronic, or situational. And I would imagine that in some way, we're all suffering from a little mild to moderate situational depression right now, right? How can we not be? And it's really, really important to know that depression isn't the same as having a bad day or just feeling a little blue. It is really something that if you have it or somebody else has it, we can't snap out of it. We can't, just watch a bunch of happy movies and expect it to be gone. It really needs treatment. It needs to be addressed at a deep level. So just know that, okay? And therapy, of course, talk therapy, emotional therapy, any kind you feel drawn to, very good. Again, it's like something that needs to be unpacked. Body work of any kind, very helpful for depression, and all kinds of expressive therapy like music, art therapy, music therapy, movement. There's a lot of studies that say exercise is as good. Exercise and therapy, those things together can be as beneficial or more beneficial than medication to treat a lot of depression. If you have angry depression, or if you just feel like you're flooded with anger, then an anger workout is very good. And let's talk about what an anger workout is. So an anger workout is when, so a lot of people think that depression is anger turned inward. So when we have things that have happened, or we have traumas or events that have happened that generate anger, and we have vows against feeling angry, or feeling angry is one of those things that's not allowed in your family system, we internalize that. We turn that inward and we point it inside here. And that creates a sort of depression that I feel that, if you know anything about the chakras, I feel that kind of depression in the third chakra. And if that's true, then we need to get the anger out of the body and express it in a healthy way, which is usually about like running or whacking something, boxing, kickboxing, get a heavy bag, you know, like a boxing bag, like a boxing thing in your garage and whack it or hit it, put it in your basement. And when we do anger work, we always need to vocalize, no, 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 no. You can say whatever you want to say. I like to swear, just me. But and if you have a lot of it, we may need like 5 minutes of anger work twice a day to kind of really clear it out. And the important thing with anger workout is that we don't target ourselves and we don't target other people. We're not, I hate myself, or, you know, if you want to, in the space of your anger workout, target somebody, that's fine. But we do it not to put that energy on somebody, but to just express our feelings. But we don't want to yell at other people, or, you know, take it out on the people around us, because that's what happens when we get to shadow work. We're going to talk about that. Now, grief work is sometimes very important too. So if you have sad depression, that has a lot to do with the heart. And I see that in the heart chakra, in grief work or grief counseling can help release that. And then numb depression often comes when the seventh chakra is shut and we feel lack of faith. We feel hopelessness and despair. We can feel that at this time in the world right now, because it's so hard to see, so hard to take in the scope of what's going on around us. It's hard to see an end to it. It's hard to know what the world is going to be like when we're come out the other side of it. And that this kind of numbness comes from shutting our connection to the source. So anything that opens your seventh chakra, any meditation or spiritual practice, can be very important for that. Last, I want to talk about here in this trifecta is addictions. And again, we can do an entire class on this topic, but just to cover it really briefly, to tell you that empaths, sensitives, healer types will often turn to addictions to try and numb out our feelings, to turn it off, to shut down the whole emotional self so that we're not feeling our own feelings and we're not feeling other people's feelings, to numb the pain, to not think about it, to not remember the trauma, right? And if you have an addiction, you need to handle that. And addiction recovery is a whole thing. If you need to get help through STEP programs or whatever you feel called to do, counseling with somebody who specializes in addiction recovery. And I bring it up now because during this time of isolation, it's so easy for us to go towards addictions, even if they're mild ones. You know, they're all bubbling up to the surface for all of this. So for all of us, it may be you're drinking wine every night, or eating your face off if you're like me, or numbing yourself on TV and wine, eating your face off at the same time. And what we could do instead is really work through our emotional processing, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And I want to just bring up this concept of primary needs and secondary pleasures. So primary needs are things like love, affection, touch, sensuality, food and shelter, you know, like the basic needs we have as human animals, right? And when we don't get those, we don't get them as children, we learn to go to a secondary pleasure to get them. So for example, chocolate creates oxytocin, and that's the same chemical that gets released in your brain when you feel love, when you feel loved. So That's why we love eating chocolate. Heroin does the same thing, and so do all opiates, by the way. So think about if you're stuck in isolation, like think about what it is you need. Carbs stimulate serotonin, which is a mood regulator. We're often trying to manage our own brain chemistry with these things. It's fine to do that a little bit. And addictions can be anything. I mean, food, sex, drugs, alcohol, TV, binge watching. Why do you think they call it binge watching, right? Shopping, gambling, sugar, carbs, cheese. Oh my God, that's mine. Stupid games on your phone, looking at social media, all of these things, right? Before you indulge in those, ask yourself what you're feeling. Ask yourself, what do you really need to deal with your feeling? And is there a way you can identify what your primary need is and give that to you? So you're giving yourself what you really need in this moment. Do you need a hug? Do you need comfort? Are you bored? Are you lonely? Are you anxious? Is there something you can ask from somebody else and get it? Is there something that you can give to yourself? Once we can identify what we really need, we can strategize about how to give that even to our own selves, right? And once you get into the habit of giving yourself what you truly need on a regular basis, a lot of time those tendencies towards addictions or addictive behaviors die down. They kind of fade into the background. So it's a really important and really powerful thing to think about. So I want you to really notice as we go through this time, like where are you pulled towards there? What are you trying to get? And what are you trying to feel? And how can you do that directly? So let's talk about flooding and repressing. This came up in the Q&A yesterday. So some of you were talking about how emotional you feel, and some of you were talking about, well, I don't really feel my emotions. I think I repress them and stuff them away. And that's really the two highly dysfunctional ways we have of dealing with our feelings. We fled, where we get overwhelmed, we flood, we can't stop crying, we feel out of control, we have anxiety, panic attacks, we rage. All of those go into the flooding category. That's what flooding feels like. It feels, and I have to say, terrible. It's a terrible feeling. And if you have been in that space, first of all, I'm sorry, because it sucks. And second of all, don't worry, because I've got a fix for you. And then other people were on the opposite side. It's like two sides of a polarity, two sides of a continuum here. The other side of the continuum is repressing. And that is when we go numb, we don't feel anything, we push our feelings away, we get busy, we do, so we don't have to feel. And that also feels terrible. Although, I don't know, I can't say, they're both pretty horrible. And then many of us will have a combination of these things, which is maybe you repress, fled, right? That's pretty common. So take a moment and really consider which one you are. Are you a repressor? Are you a flooder? Or do you both? And I want you to think for a moment about, here's like a little quiz, a little inventory you can do. What were the rules in your family about your feelings? Were you allowed to feel? Were your feelings accepted? Was everybody floody over emotional wrecks? Was everybody in your family repressed? Or did you have one parent that had both? Your father was a flooder and your mother was a repressor? Think about that. Think about what feelings weren't you allowed to feel? Oh, we're the family that never gets mad, or we're always mad, or we're the family that never gets sad. Like in my family, it was disrespectful to be angry. Like children weren't, but we could cry. So my parents were kind and sympathetic when we cried. But anger wasn't something that ever got handled directly. So everybody in my family cries when they're angry. Or cries like whatever feeling you have, it's going to come out as tears, because that was the open channel, In some families, it's the other way around, where they're yellers or screamers, and they yell and scream when they're sad, right? So which one were you? And in the middle of this continuum, there's something called containing. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to do the meditation on how to contain our feelings at the end of this. So containing is we allow the emotion to move through our body like in a wave, right? So feelings a lot of times come up from the ground. They sort of start at the root chakra and they flow up our spine like a wave of energy. And that's what they're meant to do. They're meant to, our whole energy field, our whole energy system is meant to let that wave move through us. And then the feeling is gone. If you ever look at kids, like really little kids, you'll notice that that's what they do. They have their intense feeling, they cry, or they're mad, or they, whatever, they love you, and that feeling goes whoop all the way through, and then they're clear, like it came and went. And that's, their feelings are meant to be like waves on the beach. They come in, they go out. They come in, they go out. And all these rules and traumas and blocks in our chakras and places where we shut down, shut that wave down, so that, and then we shut it down with our conscious mind a lot. I'm not going to feel that. I'm not going to let anyone know how I feel. We shut that down. And when that happens, the wave comes through us and the feeling sticks around and creates a lot of static in our energy field until we release it. Okay. So we all need a way to process our feelings, and we all need to do it every day. And we all need to do it every day for the rest of our lives. As far as this is my opinion. Okay. Certainly if you're sensitive or an empath, you need to do it. Frankly, I think everyone needs to do it. And maybe on top of that, while we're really cleaning out our feeling closet and our trauma closet, we might need weekly therapy, counseling, body work, energy work, right? Doing it yourself is like brushing your teeth, and going out and getting work on you, done on you emotionally, is like going to the dentist or going to the doctor. So we need a functional way to process our feelings every day. Here's the way that I do it. I'm going to give you a bunch of ways, and I want you to really commit to doing this, especially now, because you're going to be so much in better shape if you do it. So I'm a journaly kind of person, and I like a journal. So my friend Jacob Norby taught me this trick, his technique, and that is to write in my journal every day. And I write with a real pen on a real piece of paper, but you can type if you like. And it's 3 simple questions. How do I feel? And I write blah, 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 right? What do I need? And that's the tough one for me. I have to really think about that. And then what would I love? And I start this, what would I love, with I'm so happy and grateful that. So happy and grateful that my whole family survived this virus, and that I still have a job, and that we're all out walking around again, and I can get my hair cut, whatever. And that I have to do it every day. And if I don't do it, if I miss a day, I end up feeling very tangled up, very out of sorts emotionally. So, and I do that, and then I meditate every morning. I usually meditate it takes me an hour. So I journal for about half an hour, and I meditate for about half an hour. If you're not a journaler or you don't have time, you can talk to yourself. You can talk to yourself while you're walking. You can talk to yourself in the car, if you're commuting. And I do think it's important to talk to yourself out loud if you're going to do that, as if you were journaling. Because if you just think it, your mind will get distracted and run off on different pathways. So that's another way you can do it. And sometimes on days I don't have time to journal, I'll talk to myself in the car on the way to my office. And if you happen to know EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, sometimes called tapping, you can combine the talking to yourself and the tapping. And if you don't know EFT, it's fantastic. It's a very easy to learn modality you can do on your own, that where you literally tap on these points. They're the bladder meridian. And the bladder meridian is the meridian that holds the emotional charge in our body. And you tap and rant. So it's like blah, 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 blah. Okay. And you go and you go. And I taught myself how to do this by watching YouTube videos, but you can get trained in it too. And then you wait until you feel the energy clear, and then you tap what's called the positive round, which is, even though I have all my feelings, I still love and you tap basically what I would love. I really am grateful for whatever. And you tap sort of a more positive round. The other thing that I do is something called the method, and I will give you a copy of it. It's from my spiritual teacher, Bob Lancer, And it's a guided meditation that you do to go all the way into your feelings and honor them in a very powerful way. So I'm going to give you access to that. It's fantastic. I hope you try it. I just want to take a little bit of a minute here before we do our meditation to sort of honor your inner child, because I think the inner child is, and everyone is freaking out. Oh, I forgot to bring my bear. I'll bring it next time. Everyone's inner child is freaking out right now. And the inner child, everyone has one, and has a child archetype, if you want to think about it that way. And it is, on one hand, the most beautiful part of us. It's like so soulful and is filled with love and joy and spontaneity and like the most beautiful radiating nature of your soul that you have. And on the other hand, it holds all of your unprocessed childhood trauma. So it's a tricky archetype and we need some help. So with this, so the inner child inside of us doesn't like change. Never. Nobody's inner child does. It fears the unknown. So working with the inner child is very important right now. And you can do all of the work that I just said, put on the inner child. So you can have an inner child journal. You can have inner child tapping. You can talk to your inner child in the car. All of those things apply. And if you feel like you need special attention to your inner child right now, I do an inner child workshop. It's long. It's like 2 months long. Very powerful, very, very deep. And I'm starting it again I only teach it, usually do it twice a year. And I'm doing it in like late April. So if you're interested, keep an eye, you can contact me or keep an eye open for that coming out. The other thing that really works for some people is meditation. So if you're a meditator, you may find that you can really easily process your emotions through meditation. And there's certain meditative styles that are better for this. So insight meditation, it's a specific kind of meditation where you are trained to examine your thoughts and feelings, is really effective for this. Other kinds of meditations, you're trained to sort of ignore your thoughts and feelings. So that's another thing. If you like to meditate, you can check out a modality called insight meditation and see if that makes sense for you. So I want to talk about how do we hold space for other people. And we're all called to do that right now. And one of the things that you want to do is make sure that you're in a good space yourself, that you're doing your self-care, that you're processing your own emotions. Put the mask on yourself first, right? And then we can really kind of effectively hold space for other people. And here's exactly, I'm going to teach you exactly what I do, and I do it in my sessions all day long when I'm working with people. Is you want to ground, and you don't have time to be like, time out. I know you're trying to tell me something, but I'm going to do my grounding meditation. We don't have to do that, but you push your feet into the ground. If you're sitting in a chair, you can push your spine back into the chair. You can sit sort of upright and push your feet into the ground. You can breathe into your heart in your belly and really ground. So like open up this Hara line or the life purpose line really big to hold a grounded space for other people. When I'm doing it, and I'll really look at into their eyes. Because I feel like when we show up with our heart opened and very grounded and very present, and we really listen, healing happens for another person. And so many people just need to be listened to right now, always, but especially right now. So what I do is I imagine my heart opening so big that it's going to fit around their entire situation. And sometimes it's really hard because I keep thinking I've heard it all. I've been doing this work for 25 or 30 years. And I've just heard the worst traumas you could ever imagine. And I think I've heard it all. And then every once in a while I get one where I'm like, oh my God. And I have to do that. I have to breathe, and I have to put this heart. It's sort of like the Sacred Heart. It's like if you know Jesus and the Sacred Heart, it's like where our heart is sort of pierced open by compassion, by the pain and suffering. And when we open the heart that way, that's like in the image of the Sacred Heart is like flames come out of it, and those flames are the fire of compassion. And the meaning of the Sacred Heart, as far as I understand it, is that inside the flame of divine compassion, we can transmute suffering. We can literally take suffering out of the world by listening with grounded, heart open compassion to somebody else's stuff. So that's what I want you to do. You push down your grounding cord, you breathe, you continue to breathe, like do the grounding breath. You can dump all the stuff you're feeling down the grounding cord. You can dump all the stuff they're feeling down the grounding cord. And you just do that opening thing to really show up and listen. So try that. I want you to try that. And I want you to really don't underestimate the power of that to take suffering out of the world, to show up for another person. You can do it in the grocery store. When the lonely little old lady walks up to you and starts telling you her life story, you ground, you look in her eyes, you open your heart, you put your heart around, right? That whole situation, you pray. If you're a prayerful person, you can pray, you can send Reiki, you can just feel compassion. And when you're done, you want to kind of pull yourself back together, flush anything you picked up down the grounding cord, and disconnect from that person in a conscious way. And once I learned that technique, even as a very sensitive empath, I stopped running away from people. I started really wanting to connect with people in a lot deeper way, because I felt like I knew what to do. So that's something you can do. And I hope that you're called on to do it often. I hope that you do it often, and I hope that you find that technique helpful. So let's do our clearing our emotions meditation right now. So this is what I do in myself. And let's try it. This is how we contain, so we're not flooding or repressing. Here we go. Okay. So we start with a basic kind of grounding energy again. So if you can, sit up straight. If you can, put your feet on the floor. If you can, uncross your arms and legs. And I want you to breathe into yourself for a minute. So just take a deep breath. And again, notice how you feel. Notice how your body feels. And take some breathing. So breathe into that. You can do that same evaluation we did yesterday. Are you in or out? Where are you? Where's your consciousness? And breathe into your heart and your belly. And on the exhale, push that energy down your legs and into your feet. And then do that again. Take a nice deep breath. Imagine light coming in the top of your head. Breathe into your heart and your belly. And on the exhale, put the grounding cord down, 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 down into the earth, through all the layers of the building and all the layers of the earth, right to the center of the planet. And take a moment. On your next inhale breath, you're going to fill yourself with light. And just release down the grounding cord. Anything you're holding on to, we'll send it with a prayer, with a blessing. Drop it down there. Anything you're holding on to that's yours, or anything that's anyone else's that you picked up, let it go. And now I want you to open up to your feelings. Open up to your emotional self. And you might just be instantly aware of what your emotions are. And that's cool if you are. Or you might actually feel pain or tension in your body. So tension is usually a place where we're holding back on a feeling, where we're tightening or resisting a feeling. So notice if you feel tension somewhere, and if you do, breathe into it with some curiosity. The same thing is true for pain. Sometimes we have pain because we have pain. Sometimes we have pain, physical pain, because it's really emotional pain. So breathe into the pain or the tension and ask, is there an emotion underneath that? Stay and get into curiosity. Stay out of judgment. So breathe into pain, tension, breathe into your feelings. And now open to your feelings and really let yourself feel your feelings. Don't hold them back. Like lean into it. And on the inhale breath, you're going to take a really deep inhale breath, okay? So breathe deeply, breathe into your belly. Try not to shallow chest breathe here. And on the inhale breath, you're going to open to your feelings, let them expand. Let yourself really feel. See how much you can feel. If you're feeling pain, feel pain. If you're feeling fear, feel fear. If you're feeling sadness, feel that. If you're feeling happy and joyful, feel that. And on the inhale breath, we honor the feeling. Like imagine you can bow to it. Thank it for being there. Listen to it if it wants to tell you anything. And then on the exhale breath, see if the energy, the emotion, or the energy of that emotion wants to leave your body. Sometimes it's looking for a natural exit point. So with each inhale, you're breathing, you're opening to the feeling. And then with each exhale, maybe that energy wants to move. Maybe it wants to move out of your mouth on the exhale. Maybe it wants to move down your legs or out the top of your head. Or maybe it wants to move out the tips of your fingers. And let it go. Let it just move through your body like we're trying to get back to that place where it feels like a wave. Just take another minute to honor your feeling. And now on your next inhale breath, I want you to breathe compassion and love for yourself. And get really, really soft, really, really gentle. Like if you had a little child that came in here and told you that they were sad and scared, what would you do? You wouldn't tell that kid to shut up and not feel stuff. You would give them compassion and love. So on your inhale breath, you're going to breathe compassion and love to yourself and your feelings. And on the exhale breath, you're going to see how the feeling wants to move through you. If it helps, you can put your hand somewhere on your body. Like if you're feeling in your heart, you can put your hand in your heart. If you're feeling it on your belly, you can put your hand there to support yourself. And then you might be aware of the feeling changes. So as we're breathing and honoring, you might have a change in your feeling. You might start out sad and then begin to feel angry or anxious, and that's okay. Allow yourself to let the feeling move. You can become aware if there's stories or thoughts about the feeling, that's fine. You can notice, but don't go too far into the thoughts. Just stay curious and try to stay with the body sensation and the actual emotion. And now ask yourself what you need. What is that feeling calling for? Do you need comfort? Do you need love? Do you need reassurance? Does your feeling need to be validated? Do you need to tell yourself it's okay to feel that? Do you need to be told everything's going to be okay? So give yourself that. Tell yourself that. Give yourself whatever you need in this moment. Our feeling self needs to be validated. We need to be told it's okay to have our feelings. And take one more breath really deep in the top of your head. And we're going to clear that out of our system now. So if you have any leftover energy, drop it down the grounding cord with a blessing, with a prayer. And begin to come back into your body. Begin to feel yourself again. Wiggle your fingers and your toes. And when you're ready, come back, open your eyes, come back into the group, into the room. And take just a minute to see how you feel now. So I'm going to open to some Q&A in just a minute, but I want to really invite you to commit to one of the things we talked about as a way to process your feelings. I want you to try it. What if we did a challenge? Let's do a 30-day challenge. I think we're going to be in lockdown for another 30 days. So let's do a feeling challenge to give yourself 15 minutes, minimum half an hour max of feeling time. And one of these methods we talked about, journaling, talking to yourself, tapping, doing this meditation. Give yourself that and see what it feels like after 30 days of really paying attention to your feelings. And and honoring them and processing them in a healthy way instead of pushing them away or flooding. And this process, by the way, now if you're a repressor, it's going to take you a while to start connecting with your feelings, but this is how we do it. If you're a flooder, it's going to take you a while to stop flooding, but this is how we do it. So we create a container. The container means we're not repressing and we're not flooding. We're using our breath and our energy field and our emotional system to contain our own feelings. So let's try it and see how it goes for us. And I hope that you find a way to practice the showing up for other people by opening your heart, by staying very grounded and opening your heart in a conscious way, because everyone needs help right now. All right, so I think that's our time for tonight. And I really look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. It's a cool class tomorrow. I'm having so much fun with it. It's a little wacky. We're going to talk about our immune system and all the spiritual immunity, like all the factors that play into it. For example, EMF radiation, the pH balance of our body, that kind of stuff that really we're going to get into how we deal with having a porous energy field. And I have this immune activating meditation that I just made up that I'm super excited to try with you guys. So thank you all for being here, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.